Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/1pvs2p. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Again, that's audibletrial.com/1pvs2p.
Thanks to Audible for supporting our podcast, and thanks to you, the listener, for supporting us.
Oculus angers customers in more ways than one. Square Enix unloads a ton of Final Fantasy XV news. And GG to a PlayStation employee helping a disabled gamer in need. All that plus more today, Tuesday, April 5th, 2016. You're listening to the 1P versus 2P podcast. I'm Taylor Ray. With me, as always, is my co-host and brother, Ryan Ray. Let's begin with
First Attack.
The top stories from this past week. Let's begin with Nintendo firing their marketing specialist, Allison Rapp, this past week, a move that followed a lot of criticism online, and it followed a ruthless online harassment campaign towards her. She's endured this for a long time from gamers peeved by changes to some of their beloved games. So Nintendo insisted that their firing, which was announced last Wednesday, had nothing to do with a bunch of online harassment from the Gamergate movement, but Rapp argues otherwise. Let me read you the statement from Nintendo. Quote, though Miss Rapp's termination follows her being the subject of criticism from certain groups via social media several weeks ago, the two are absolutely not related. Nintendo is a company committed to fostering inclusion and diversity in both our company and the broader video game industry, and we firmly reject the harassment of individuals based on gender, race, or personal beliefs. We wish Miss Rapp well in her future endeavors. Then Rapp responded to Nintendo's statement on Twitter, admitting to, quote, moonlighting under a fake name and with no real identifiers, end quote, in order to pay off student loans. Ryan, did Nintendo cave in to outside pressure to fire Allison?
It appears that way, but it's really unclear what the job was or why Rapp used a fake name for the second job. And I think regardless of how things unfolded, this incident is just the latest in a series of really, really disturbing stuff that demonstrates just how precarious women are in the gaming industry, and the lengths some people will go to ensure their silence or even force out people that they don't agree with. Rapp, if you might recall, has been a lightning rod of controversy at Nintendo, largely because of a thesis paper that she wrote in college that we can kind of summarize later. But a lot of game fans point to her as the reason why Nintendo made a lot of localized changes for the recent Fire Emblem Fates game. There was a face-rubbing minigame that was in the Japan release that isn't in the US release, and also for a, let's call it a breast slider for Xenoblade Chronicles X for a character that this boob slider appears in the Japanese release and is not in the US release, and that's for a character who is underage, but in the Japanese version of the game, you can change the way that character appears. And let's just say before we go on further that we realize the unfortunate irony of two guys talking about the firing of a woman in the games industry. We really would have liked to have a woman developer talk to us about these issues, because this is a lot of stuff that pertains to them, but it also pertains to our audience and also us. We try as the gaming community to foster a culture of inclusion and diversity. It's not just lip service. We try to play games of all different stripes and try to encourage all sorts of people who make games. And Nintendo kind of being silent and not coming to the defense of one of their people after a long time, and just letting her go as kind of an easy cop-out is really a big shame and a big blight on the industry at large.
I don't usually like to talk about issues like this in the industry because it makes me uncomfortable, quite frankly. And it makes a lot of people in the gaming community uncomfortable to the point that they start attacking these women viciously for seemingly no reason. And it's really a sad state of affairs. But like you said before, Ryan, the fact that we are two males gives us a certain amount of privilege when we just playing games. We see things from the male gaze, the male perspective. And it's different for women in gaming. If you're literally just a gamer, if you're a woman and you start speaking online, let's say on Xbox Live or PSN, doesn't matter, anywhere online, immediately you're going to start experiencing some harassment by people who hide behind that anonymous banner that is the internet. And it's really, really sad. Now, that being said, it's hard for me to figure out whether or not this firing is justified because it's a lot of back and forth, he said, she said situation. Nintendo is just given that blanket corporate statement saying this has nothing to do with harassment by Gamergate. And some people are seeing that as well. It could be because Nintendo, as you may know, is very, very protective of its image, of its brand. And when someone in their marketing department, a spokesperson for the Treehouse team out of Nintendo, is engaged in a lot of like nasty dialogue, a lot of vitriolic attacks to her on Twitter, Nintendo might want to separate themselves from that, saying, well, we know you might be a victim, but we just don't want to handle this. But on the other hand, they've come out and said that she was moonlighting with a second job, which is a big no-no for someone who's a spokesperson. And while she's admitted to moonlighting under a fake name, nevertheless, they discovered it. Here's where the gray area lies, is how Nintendo discovered her second job, whether it was modeling, and then people are saying, well, also might have contributed to was her controversial thesis that she did. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's hard to parse out specifically what started this conversation with Nintendo. And now all this blowback from Allison responding, saying, well, I'm just a victim of Gamergate, and congratulations, they got what they wanted. Nintendo did nothing to protect me, and now we're in a sad state of affairs where we're talking about women in gaming all over again. These kinds of things happen over and over again, and it's very, very, very upsetting.
Let's talk about some of the blowback very quickly here. Two developers canceled plans for making games for the Wii U after this announcement. The two developers are Necrosoft Games and Midboss, the latter of which is known for releasing Read-Only Memories, that point-and-click adventure game from last year. And on Gamasutra, Necrosoft head Brandon Sheffield wrote an essay decrying the marginalization of women in the games industry. And I have read the controversial essay in question from Rap that got everybody kind of whipped up. And it's an essay regarding the sexualization of children in Japan. Basically, the premise of the essay is that the West should not push its particular ideas of right and wrong on the rest of the world. But the core proof in her argument is that lower rates of child abuse and rape in Japan are indicative that pornography may be helping. Japan does have some of the lowest rates of reported rape and abuse, but those stats have been increasing as laws rise to support such claims. So here again, the old maxim of correlation does not imply causation. Many publications, including the Japan Times, support the idea that the lower rate of rape reportage is likely just that, lower reporting, not a direct result of more available pornography, as Rap kind of argues in her essay. You know, that conclusion would have to, of course, come from a better sociological study. I just want to say that it is possible to disagree with someone's politics and yet support them professionally. I don't necessarily agree with her stance in this essay, if she does still believe that. And I think a lot of people calling for her firing, I don't think the essay is as inflammatory as it is. You know, a lot of academic thesis papers tend to trot out these ideas that are very experimental in nature. And I don't think that the essay is an endorsement of pedophilia that some of her critics have accused her of. But regardless, you know, Nintendo took the safe route, and they decided that letting her go was easier than protecting her from the harassment in the first place. It's the stance that a lot of corporations take when confronted with controversy, but I'd say it's really hardly the right thing to do. Of course, Rap is not the only woman in games or the tech industry to be attacked viciously just for criticizing the thing they love. Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn are just a few names on the short list for this kind of thing. And honestly, this is the kind of news story that honestly keeps me from identifying with games culture. The community can be so much better than this, but time and again, we prove that we're not better than this.
Yeah, I hate to tell people that, you know, I'm an avid gamer, because immediately that's a label that is negative in a lot of people's eyes. When we hear about video games being covered in the mainstream media, in news, we hear about things like violence in video games, we hear about online harassment, and it's really, really sad, because the industry is so much more than that. There are a lot of passionate people, creative people, making excellent games, excellent experiences that you and I and everyone who's listening to this podcast can relate to. They use it as a form of entertainment. And when things like this distract from that very positive image that I have in my mind of the industry, it's very, very upsetting to me. And look, it's just, I totally agree with what you're saying, Ryan. We can be better than this. And this really opens up the dialogue for it. And unfortunately, Allison is one of the casualties of this discussion, unfortunately. But it also, I have to play devil's advocate a little bit here, because is it really up to Nintendo to protect an employee who is she was a spokesperson, she is in their was in their marketing department, is the face of their brand, and is involved in some of these controversial online conversations. It could be totally within their right to, terminate her without cause, with any employee without cause, whether or not it's a man or woman, don't you think?
But I think it's a little disingenuous to play devil's advocate here, because what this really gets into is conversations about the kinds of ideas you can have while under the employ of somebody else. And I think a lot of women are getting short shrift in their respective industries. I talked to my fiance about this. She works in the healthcare industry, and a lot of the same opportunities that are afforded to men in her industry aren't offered to her just by the fact of her sex. And that is such, it drives me up a wall. And I think women in the game industry also run up against this all the time. We see a lot of harassment of female game studio heads. Think of Jade Raymond and Ubisoft a long time ago. Think about every sexist comment you hear on Xbox Live or PSN or really anywhere. Over half of gamers are women, and a lot of the games and a lot of the things that are said about women in games actively attack the notion that they are even allowed to exist in this space. And that's such a dangerous notion for the industry to go down. To be frank, if I have a daughter someday, I would, if we still have this kinds of toxic games culture, I'm not interested in having her play video games, because some of this stuff is really, really ugly, and I don't want her to be opened up to all these verbal attacks, verbal abuse, the kind of honestly bullcrap that a lot of women have to put up with just for being a woman.
But is it possible to enjoy video games without having to engage the community or even pay attention to news like this? To you and me, to just gamers, what does it matter whether or not Allison Rapp gets fired or stays hired by Nintendo? Does this affect us in any way?
Potentially down the road, for all we know, Rapp could have been arguing for some better game ideas. We know that she was a big fan of Nintendo. In fact, after all of this was said and done about Nintendo firing her and all the blowback from it, she tweeted out a statement that said, "Look, I know a lot of great people who work in Nintendo. Please continue to support the work that they do, and also please continue to support women in the games industry, despite what happened to me." So, I don't think this is going to affect the everyday person playing games, the everyday person who buys Nintendo products. But at the same time, we as players have the responsibility to call out when companies do things that necessarily don't support the people who create them. And this is just another one in those long lines of things.
Well, I'm glad you answered that question. Well said. I totally agree with that. Absolutely. And for us to be inclusionary of all genders, all minorities, to have a really diverse games culture it's a very positive thing, not only for people who make video games, but for people who play video games, because without that audience, we don't have that support given to these companies. Then we start seeing boycotts, these toxic communities. People don't want to engage or play in video games anymore. And now all of a sudden we're left with just a handful of companies making a handful of games. And it's just any industry, no matter what, we have to be able to support those who are being harassed. And talking about this story is just like another brick in the wall, unfortunately, but maybe someday that wall will break down, and that's what I hope for in the future. Okay, let's move along, because that was a huge downer. Let's move on to Xbox One, Microsoft, what they did last week that made good on a nearly 3-year-old promise. They finally turned the Xbox One into a dev kit for free. So basically what they've done is they've unlocked the ability for all retail Xbox One consoles, that's all of them, no matter whether you're a developer or not, to become dev kits. And that's available as a preview for now, but it's going to be finalized as a full release this summer. And it's going to allow developers to build, test, and experiment using the quote-unquote universal Windows program that Microsoft has been touting in terms of developing games. And converting a console to this dev mode requires no special equipment. They don't have to pay anything extra. Though to fully access the abilities, the users are going to need to create a Dev Center account for $19. So Ryan, what are some of the other requirements to turn your Xbox One into a dev console, and what does it mean? Why is this a positive thing for Xbox One?
So in order to even be a part of this preview program, you're going to need to join the Windows Insider program, which is their beta test of Windows. You're going to need to be running Windows 10 on your PC. You're going to need to have a wired connection to your PC from your Xbox One. You're going to have to install the latest Visual Studio 2015 and Windows builds. And you're also going to need to have at least 30 gigs of storage free on your Xbox One. On top of it, this preview only offers access to 448 megabytes of the Xbox One's 8 gigs of RAM. And when eventually this comes out of the preview phase, you will be able to access the full 1 gig of RAM that is supported for all Xbox Universal Windows Platform games and apps. I think this is, on the whole, a positive thing for Xbox One. This is a promise that they made 3 years ago, and it's finally coming to fruition. I'm not sure who will be developing games on the Xbox One using this platform. It's clearly not the multi-platform home this generation. And on top of it, this seems a little bit too little too late. As I wrote in my story a few weeks ago on this subject, Microsoft has been trying to do this move where they try to unify PC and console development at the same time, trying to make them interchangeable. And frankly, I don't think people who are interested in developing PC games, and I also don't think people who are interested in developing exclusively Xbox One games, are kind of very interested in having them kind of commingle like this. On top of it, Microsoft is still going to have to manually approve anything that gets developed under this platform. So this is going to be a lot like the Xbox Live Indie program that was present on the 360. And there were some good games to eventually come out of that, but a lot of really, really subpar middleware and like dollar games that were barely proofs of concept.
What I don't understand from the story is the fact that, so if you have like a normal retail Xbox One, you get a dev console. What about those people that already have the dev kits? What separates this feature from those that actually have real dev kits that were shipped to them directly from Microsoft even before it initially launched? That's the big question I have about this initiative. Like, is this program just giving you like a lower barrier to entry to start developing games? Or is this going to cause more indie developers to start working on that platform? I'm assuming that's what Microsoft is trying to get at here, but it's going to take a lot of months, maybe even years, for us to see any of the benefits from this program, because 3 years after the original launch is a long time to have promised this feature. So it might be, like you said, a little too late for this kind of thing. All right, let's move on to our last story involving the Oculus Rift launch and some super shady things that are going on, including, let's start off with their terms of service. There are some really weird things. So there are some details in the terms of service, like waiving your right to a jury trial and agreeing to go into arbitration instead. So negotiating to a settlement instead of going to trial. These can be found in a lot of different terms of service and user agreements put out there. So that's not particularly shady, but there are a few things that really are, like the fact that Oculus can terminate your service for a ton of reasons, and the fact that third parties can collect information on you, which was something that was not well communicated before launch, before people started pre-ordering this thing. And the devil's really in the details here, because there's some other stuff in here that's also pretty alarming, like the fact that Oculus and basically their parent company, Facebook, owns creative content, and we'll get into that, and the fact that it can collect data, like I said before, by third parties while you're using your device, including recording your voice. So Ryan, why don't you talk about like, why are these things kind of shady, okay?
Absolutely. So the first one, the Oculus owning your creative content, basically if you create something using Oculus's services, the terms of service say that you can surrender all rights to that work and that Oculus can use it whenever and however it wants for whatever purposes. That's really problematic. It's kind of a new twist on copyright that isn't very good. You know, if you make something creatively using the pipelines that Oculus provides, the company can use it and they don't have to pay you for using it. Typically, a lot of hardware and software manufacturers don't go that far when they ask you to develop on their platform. And Oculus is going this far. They can even use your software even if you don't agree with its use. They don't say they go as far as they outright own the content, but what the terms of service do say is that Oculus can access this content in ways that some creators might find intrusive. So for some reason in the future, Oculus decides to promote one of the games that you made on its headset for a campaign attack ad against a candidate that you don't agree with. They are well within their right to do that according to these terms of service. And if you don't agree with that, too bad, you signed your life away when you started using the headset. The second aspect of this, the collecting data from you while you're using the device, is really, really troublesome. It's kind of the reason why a lot of people were very skeptical of Microsoft's Kinect, listening in with the Xbox One, listening to conversations and potentially serving up that data to third parties. Potentially, you remember that patent where if you started screaming McDonald's at the Kinect, it would start serving you McDonald's ads. Oculus is basically owned by Facebook. And the terms of service say that by using the Oculus headset, you agree that Facebook and Oculus can use your location and log your activity, and it can even do so automatically without letting you have any say in whether or not they can do that. In fairness sake, Steam and Valve both does this, but they anonymize the reporting data that you do when you decide to check on what your system specs are. And they can't really identify what the IP address is or if it's really Ryan or Taylor using that computer, let's say if you're us. They do so, they kind of anonymize that data. That's really, really troubling for a VR headset that is promising a lot of immersion and what you're saying and what you're seeing while you're playing these games.
I'm not so surprised at the fact that they're collecting data on what you're playing, when you're playing it, how you're playing it. But the fact that they can sell this stuff to third parties and the fact that it's coming to light now is going to turn off a lot of people. A lot of people don't like that aspect with a lot of different software. It's not just about Facebook. They're concerned about their privacy, about their data. These sorts of things come up all the time, especially with social media. Like, who owns the content that you put out there? Even when, like, YouTubers want to monetize their own content, like, they're the content creators. Who's getting the biggest slice of the pie? And this is always like a sticky situation, especially legally. This is also uncharted territory when it comes to VR hardware, though. And it's upsetting to me that Oculus, right out of the gate, really botched this launch, okay? They're the first to come out in the market, the first to open up pre-orders, right? They came in at a higher price point than most people expected. Their messaging has been quite poor. And on top of that, we have to bring up something else that happened last week. Basically, Oculus is also apologizing for a lot of shipping delays with the Rift. And now they're saying they're going to waive shipping fees for all orders to date because also a lot of people are getting their Oculus damaged in transit, which is really, really, really sad. And it's hard to say whether or not it's the carrier related, whether they're using FedEx, UPS, USPS, whatever, it doesn't matter, or whether or not it's just really, really poor packaging, which signs point to it's really the latter. It's really Oculus. So yeah, they have a golden opportunity here and they're squandering it away. But I'm very thankful for those outlets that report this kind of information because consumers need to be informed about the hardware that they're going to be buying in the future. And if now we're opening ourselves up to new advertisements based on our preferences, it's going to be weird if you're playing like a space sim game and then all of a sudden Oculus is going to start serving up ads from, I don't know,
NASA.
Not that NASA would be advertising on the platform, but I think you get what I'm trying to say here. It's just kind of creepy, and it's uncharted territory, especially in the VR space.
All right, let's move on to the games that came out this week.
I love new releases.
First game we're going to talk about is Quantum Break, out for the Xbox One and PC, April 5th. Hey, that's today. This is a third-person shooter with time manipulation mechanics by the developers of Alan Wake and Max Payne, Remedy. So far, the game has been getting mixed reviews for trying to blend gameplay with TV episode-length cutscenes that stream in. Of course, there's a 75 gig patch, that is correct, 75 gig patch for Xbox One players if you don't want the videos to stream in. Taylor, are you at all interested in Quantum Break?
Well, yeah, the fact that you have to sit through, I've heard that these cutscenes can last as long as like 20, 30 minutes. That's a long time to get back into the action. And while they're skippable, I feel like you might be missing out on a lot of the story, which I hate doing. I hate having to skip over it and like not knowing the context of what I'm doing in the game itself. And that seems kind of half-baked to me. And the shooting, from what I'm reading in these reviews, is also kind of average. And, you know, it looks like a very, very beautiful game. And Microsoft has gotten in trouble in the past, so we've talked about this on our show, with the fact that they've originally announced that this was an Xbox One exclusive, and then moving it on to PC, and it made a lot of people angry. They thought that this was going to be one of those killer apps that really made the Xbox One, made you want to buy this console, and all along they could have just bought the PC version. So whenever I hear about games with mixed reviews like this, just got to wait for a price drop, always.
All right, let's move on to a game that's coming out for PC and PS4. It's called Enter the Gungeon. That's also out today, April 5th. This is a top-down indie shooter with procedural levels.
All right, and last but not least, we have Honeycam Studio for PC. That came out yesterday. It's a management simulator game from the creators of Honey Pop. Ryan, you want to take it away? I think you know a little bit about what Honey Pop is.
Right, so Honey Pop was a match 3 puzzle game, playing off of a lot of success of games like Puzzle Quest, Hexic, and to get to the long and short of it,
just get right to it. Get to the core of it. What is Honey Pop?
Honey Pop is a game where you play as a character trying to get with anime ladies. You try to date them. You try to give them gifts. When you go out on dates with them, that's the part that's actually a puzzle game. You try to match 3, and that gets you to like them to like you more, and eventually to get them to sleep with you and show you some mildly pornographic images. So Honeycam Studio is the sequel to this game, playing off of a different genre of games. You know, a lot of clicker games where you basically just click around and it's a bunch of things happen while you're clicking. This is a game where you basically play as this maybe mafioso or mob boss, or anyway, this head of this webcam studio, and you have a bunch of girls and you try to get them as popular as you can so you can make more money, so you can make them better, and so on and so forth. And interestingly, the Steam release comes with a note from the developers that says, quote, that the sexual themes in this game are mostly for fun and humor and don't make for particularly great fapping material.
Okay, listen, Ryan. You have not been more enthusiastic about a new game release than the way you just described what this game is about. So I'm silently judging you over here about this while you were describing that to me.
Hey, in my defense, I wrote a negative review on Steam for Honey Pop. I think a lot of the quote pornographic images were very cheeky. Let's face it, if you're looking for that kind of stuff or to get titillated, there are better free avenues which you can do that on the internet. As a puzzle game, it was okay. I really like management simulator games. I really loved Game Dev Story, for example. Came out a while ago. And I know the developer is being kind of cheeky here, but I think this game is going to be popular for that certain kind of fan who is looking for hot anime ladies to mac on.
Okay. All right, let's move on before we get even weirder. Let's talk about some new games that were announced.
Here comes a new challenger!
Let's start with Tokyo 42, which is think Grand Theft Auto meets Syndicate, and it's an isometric action game. It really looks spectacular. So you have this gun for hire, there's this rotating camera mechanic, there's stealth, cats, shootouts, nice colors. It's right now in pre-alpha, but we're expecting it out next year.
I highly recommend you Google this game. It's called Tokyo 42. Looks really, really cool. I really look forward to checking it out when it comes out. All right, let's talk about this past week's big motherload of Final Fantasy 15 news. We finally have a release date. It's coming out September 30th this year. At the same time, Square Enix also dropped a Platinum demo that's now available both on Xbox One and PS4 that shows off a different section of the game than the other demo, Episode Ducase, that was previously available by buying a copy of Final Fantasy Type 0 last year. A bunch of other news also came along this announcement of the release date. There's a free-to-play mobile game that's also coming alongside the release called Justice Monsters 5. That kind of looks like a pinball game meets Monster Strike, which of course is that mobile game that is very popular in Japan.
Apparently, there's also a 5-episode anime prequel to the game that's coming. Episode 1 is already out. And a Final Fantasy CGI movie called Kingsglaive Final Fantasy 15 that will feature Game of Thrones Sean Bean, Lena Headey, and also Breaking Bad's Aaron Paul. So those actors are doing voices for the movie, but the characters they're portraying that are also in the game will be voiced by other people in the actual Final Fantasy 15.
Also, Square Enix says that we shouldn't expect a PC version of the game anytime soon, according to an interview at Engadget. Once the console version is done, again, this game is coming out to PS4 and Xbox One later this year. The developers said that they will take a good hard look at the PC and what they need to do and consider all their options. I am super excited for Final Fantasy 15. I played the last demo. It plays very, very differently than other Final Fantasy games. It's very similar to Final Fantasy 12. It's a little more action-oriented than the kind of turn-based RPG that old school Final Fantasy fans are really used to. And the game looks gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. It kind of looks to me like the story of the game is going to be kind of like a road movie where you're playing as 4 guys traveling together in this car. In this presentation last week, they also showed the car kind of turning into a flying vehicle. So it's basically the car is the Batmobile. The game looks really cool. Really interesting transmedia strategy with this game. This was the thing that really ruined Squaresoft back in the day when they created that movie Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. That movie basically bankrupted the company and forced the merger with Enix to make Square Enix that we know now. And very interesting times for this game. This game has been in development for over a decade. It was originally called Final Fantasy Versus 13, and it's finally now coming out.
Well, I'm just excited we're getting a new numbered Final Fantasy that's not an MMO. And I know I'm going to get flack for that, so go ahead and tweet me, don't care. But Final Fantasy 11 and Final Fantasy 14, not my bag. I'm just excited that we're getting a new true Final Fantasy JRPG this time around. All right, and last for a new game announcement from this past week, Kingdom Hearts Unchained X, the mobile version of the game that first appeared on browsers in 2013, is actually out this week on April 7th, so that's in 2 days. This thing is going to be available on iOS and Android. Basically, you're collecting cards to use them to battle enemies for the purpose of, well, getting more cards. So might be like a lot of free-to-play hooks in there. So as your card collection grows, you're going to be able to sacrifice your weak cards, level up stronger ones. Game also has the typical social aspect of teaming up with other players to take down bosses. So there's also that multiplayer element to it. That's a positive for mobile games. You don't see that too much, especially cooperatively.
Frankly, this sounds a lot like Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories, but for phones. And the art style reminds me a lot of Theatrhythm. Kingdom Hearts is a very convoluted game series with a story that's incomprehensible unless you've played every single spin-off game, and this is just kind of doubling down on it, and seems to be a marker that Square Enix is also moving into the social game space with their popular franchises like Kingdom Hearts.
That's it for new game announcements. Let's move on to our GG story of the week. GG to Sony's Alex Nawabi. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that last name, but he's a member of PlayStation's research and development team, and he built a custom controller for a gamer in need, a gamer with cerebral palsy. He's this guy, he's a college student named Peter Byrne. He wrote to Sony complaining about some of the problems with his new DualShock 4 controller for the PS4, where his left hand was constantly brushing up against the touchpad in the middle, which would inadvertently pause a lot of the games that he was playing. So in Alex Nawabi, the Sony employee's spare time, he built this custom modded DualShock 4 controller with a disabled touchpad, but also installed a new extra pause button. And it was not an official PlayStation product. This guy did this in his spare time, so that's something to be commended. It just took one simple request, one guy in need, and I just have to congratulate this dude for doing this. This is really a positive thing we should be highlighting in the industry all the time.
As a normally abled gamer, I find that is a really annoying feature on the DualShock 4 myself, but I really have to commend Nawabi for doing this for somebody with cerebral palsy. We have a lot of people who play games in the gaming community, and it's really nice to see a positive news story, somebody doing something nice for somebody for a change. So GG to Alex Nawabi of Sony for creating a specially modded controller for a fan of the console.
Okay, let's wrap up the show. Ryan, you ready for the bonus stage?
Yeah, let's do it.
Activision Blizzard has reduced staff at UK-based Freestyle Games, which developed last year's Guitar Hero Live. A representative for Activision, which bought the independent studio in 2008, told Polygon that it will restructure the developer following company layoffs. And back in February, the company revealed in an open call to investors that Guitar Hero Live had sold, quote, lower than expected.
Looks like classic instrument music rhythm games aren't coming back at all. Between this and the Rock Band 4 news, I am not surprised. Square Enix this past week shut down servers for Final Fantasy XI on PlayStation 2 and Xbox 360. If you were still playing the 16-year-old multiplayer online game, you must now switch to the PC version in order to continue. But, in good news, Square Enix is letting those character transfers happen for free.
There were people still playing that game. I cannot believe it. I remember what kind of a nightmare it was to play that game on dial-up back in the day. Wow, I'm shocked that people on PS2 continued to play that game. That's amazing. Donald Trump tweeted a terrible campaign ad that completely ripped off a Mass Effect 2 trailer using EA's actual music and actual voice actors. EA took down the YouTube video, but as of this recording, it's still available via Trump's tweet.
The video basically equated Donald Trump with the Elusive Man, which I could not think of a more perfect analogy if you played Mass Effect 2. Oh boy.
Yeah, spoiler alert, he's the ultimate bad guy. Okay, that's it. If you liked our show, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes and Stitcher. It would be a huge help. Please let us know what you think of our show.
All of our episodes can also be heard on our site, which is 1pvs2p.com. You can also subscribe to the show by searching with your favorite podcast app or by using our site's RSS feed. All of our sources for this week's stories have been posted at the link in the show notes.
Like our Facebook page, facebook.com/1pvs2p, and follow us on Twitter at 1pvs2p_podcast. As always, we want to thank Phonetic Hero for the use of his songs for our show, Coffee Stomp and Super Manly Brothers X. Both of those songs are part of the compilation project Chiptunes Equals Win.
Thanks for listening. See everybody next week.